right. Oh, Amy, do you want me to give you one more introduction?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I thought you were just going to give the quick intro and then I'll...
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so I'm going to pass this off to Amy Simpson to give the presentation to go over the our new presumptive approach calculator, which is up online. She's the engineer on our team who has basically kind of, done the whole pack redone the whole pack from the ground up. So she is our resident expert on this topic. So thanks so much, Amy.
Okay. Hi, I'm Amy Simpson, the engineer with the Stormwater Manual team. And yeah, this presentation will be about the presumptive approach calculator. So I just wanted to give a quick presentation overview. There'll be 4 parts to the presentation: an introduction to the pack, then updates to the new pack, and then the hierarchy levels, which give you the requirements that need to be met and the design options that go with those. And finally, part 4, the sizing and design demonstration. So part 1, the introduction. The pack is a city provided calculator that can be used to size the following categories of facilities, each of which can have 6 different configurations. So it can size basins, planters, and slope facilities. And these can be designed in 2 general locations. They're either in the public right-of-way, which are also called green streets, or they're on parcels, and parcels can be public or private. And I have the link provided here at the top. It's https://pack.portland.gov to go and to go onto the pack. The categories, there'll be an option in the pack for which categories you can choose, and they're all based on the side and bottom slopes. So a facility that has a flat bottom with sloped sides is called a basin. A facility with a flat bottom and vertical sides is a planter. And then if it has a sloped bottom, it doesn't matter whether it's a sloped side or a vertical side, we just call that a slope facility. In the previous pack, if it had a sloped side, we'd call it a swale and then a slope facility for vertical sides. But now you can just mix and match, like one side can be sloped, one side can be vertical, both can be vertical or both can be sloped. And whether it just matters if the bottom is sloped, then it's a sloped facility. And then the configurations, all pack facilities include this basic configuration, which is it'll have a overflow or a maximum depth, a surface storage, and blended soil. Overflows aren't always in like that, just gives you the maximum depth that it can go to. And then the surface storage is how much volume it can store on the surface. And then the blended soil is what's filtering the soil as it goes down. And this is the simplest configuration that's shown. It's called configuration A. There's a total of 6 configurations, and you'll see configuration A is the simplest. It doesn't have any of these extra things. Configurations B through F, they all have that same basic configuration, but B through F also have a rock gallery below it. And then C through F also have an underdrain within the rock gallery. And these underdrains can be a little bit different. Configuration E, the underdrain doesn't actually outflow. It's connected to a separate overflow that just facilitates further infiltration. Configuration C, D, and F, the underdrain does outflow from the facility, and discharges to like the separated storm sewer, combined storm sewer, or wherever it's going to. And then configuration D, it's the only one that has a liner. All of the other ones allow like some partial or full infiltration. And then configuration F has the overflow actually is connected to the underflow. So configuration E and F are these hybrid facilities that act as underground injection controls, UICs, that can direct water towards the groundwater with bypassing the blended soil. So that was just a quick overview of like what the pack does. Now I'm into the part 2. And the pack was updated to be consistent with the new 2020 Stormwater Management Manual. One of the key things which is shown here is there's orifice control in that, and this is just an image of an orifice. You can see the little bit of the controlled flow coming out. So the updates, part of the updates were there are new design assumptions and options in the pack. So the blended soil infiltration rate in the old pack, it was assumed to be 2 inches per hour, but after looking at it further, the blended soil, has a much higher infiltration rate. And so we're bringing that up to 6 inches per hour. The new pack also accounts for partial infiltration, and it can be designed with partial rock and not just full rock. So the previous pack, you had to have rock across the whole facility. And now you can just do like a partial rock, which is encouraged to do like, to only have it under part of the facility. And the new pack can also add orifices on under drains that receive only filtered flow, which are configuration C and D. Another update to the pack is that we have new design criteria. The water quality storm has been increased to 1.61 inches over 24 hours. And for flow control, we've also changed those. So we have for hierarchy level 2B, it's you have to do peak flow matching from half the 2-year to half the 2-year. It used to be the 2-year post had to go to the half the 2-year pre, and now it's half the 2-year post to half the 2-year pre. And also public right-of-way facilities are exempt from the 25-year peak flow matching because they're limited in the depth that they can have. They're limited to 9 inches per surface depth, which makes it really difficult to achieve that 25-year peak flow matching. Hierarchy levels 2B, 2C, and 3, all of these have flow control requirements, and these have an exemption. If the catchment is too small for peak flow matching, then instead you can filter the 25-year storm. The old pack, there were also catchments that were too small for peak flow matching, but it would just always say fail. And so we want to show an option for when the catchment is too small for peak flow matching, you have an alternative route and you can filter the 25-year storm. And we also corrected the 25-year storm. It's 3.8 inches, not 3.9 inches. And now we're in part 3 of the presentation, and this is the hierarchy levels. The requirements, the hierarchies are give different requirements based on what the receiving system is. And there's 3 main types of requirements. There's infiltration, pollution reduction or water quality, and flow control. So level 1 is if you're going to be infiltrating the 10-year storm event. And in these facilities, you have to provide pollution reduction and infiltration of the 10-year event. And that's where the water is going to, groundwater and into the ground. Level 2A, that's where it's going into the Willamette River, Columbia River, or Columbia Slough. And if you don't need to consider the pipe capacity, then you only need to look at pollution reduction for those facilities. But if you do need to consider the pipe capacity, then you need to look at flow control and pollution reduction, and then that becomes level 2C. For streams and drainage ways, that's level 2B, and then there you're looking at pollution reduction and flow control. And finally, for the combined sewer, if you're discharging to the combined sewer, you only have to look at flow control because the wastewater is going to the wastewater treatment plant, which will be providing the pollution reduction there. So I'll be stepping into each of these 3 main types, the infiltration, the pollution reduction, and the flow control. So for infiltration, that's level 1, you have to infiltrate the 10-year post-development runoff, which means there's no overflow. So as you can see below in these images, as the post-development runoff from the 10-year storm would have to actually filter through that growing medium or blended soil, and it can't get so full at the top that it overflows this overflow here. If it does, then it would fail infiltration, and you have to make the facility bigger. In configurations A, B, and E, these are allowed for infiltration because there's no outflowing under drain on these. Configuration C, D, and F, they're not allowed to be used for infiltration because there's an under drain that will capture some of the flow that has filtered through the facility, filtered through the blended soil or growing medium, and will allow it to discharge. So these aren't allowed for full infiltration. You can't have an under drain at the bottom if you're going to be fully infiltrating the 10-year storm. And similarly, the pollution reduction has the same 2 configuration separations. Configuration A, B, and E are a little bit different than configuration C, D, and F because A, B, and E don't have that under drain that exits the facility. So the pollution reduction, this applies to level 1, 2A, 2B, and 2C. And this is for all of the facilities except for the ones that discharge to the combined sewer where it's treated at the wastewater treatment plant. And this requires that the facility filter the pollution reduction storm post-development runoff. And there has to be no overflow because if any of that runoff overflows, then it's bypassing that blended soil or growing medium and it's not getting filtered by it. Configurations A, B, and E have an additional requirement in the pack because we allow for very small, like you could have a 0.1 infiltration rate or even a 0 infiltration rate. And we don't want it to become this like sizing facilities where it's just a holding basin and it can hold the pollution reduction runoff, and then the next storm that comes, it's just going to overflow. It actually has to demonstrate that it can actually filter it out and it will leave. So for A, B, and E, the pack also requires that 90% of the pollution reduction runoff has to exit within 3 days to ensure subsequent storms are filtered because there's no overflow outflowing under drain. Configuration C, D, and F, that's not necessary because as soon as it filters through, it's able to either infiltrate or exit through the under drain. So it will be able to exit in time. Then the flow control requirement that applies to levels 2B, 2C, and 3. And in this case, the first thing you'd want to check is to see, is the catchment area too small for flow control? If it is, then you can just filter the 25-year post-development runoff without any overflow. Or if it's not, then you have to limit the post-development peak outflow to the pre-development rates per the hierarchy level requirements. And these, your options for an orifice depend on the configuration you choose. So configurations A, B, and E, they can't have an orifice because there is no outflowing under drain, and the orifice is placed on the under drain outflow. Configuration F can't have an orifice because it's shown here in the middle. And as you'll see, it allows the overflow to exit that, that under drain. And so that's unfiltered flow that's entering the under drain, and unfiltered flow can clog the orifice. So that's not allowed in the pack. It's only configuration C and D, because only configuration C and D are the ones where the under drain only takes the filtered flow that's been filtered through that blended soil. And so now we're at the part of doing a sizing demo. I'll open up the pack and kind of show you what it looks like. Give a little bit about the curve numbers and how we're evaluating those, and then some sizing and design examples for different hierarchies. Before we begin, I just wanted to show this image here that we do have in the Stormwater Manual recommended values for pre-development curve numbers based on the NRCS soil type. This image is just shown for illustration purposes. You wouldn't use that for design. You'd go into your site and see what soil type you have, and then you could use look at the table for the recommended pre-development curve number to use that curve number. And so now I'm going to open up the pack, and let's see. I should probably close it so you guys can see the how it's opened up. So when you first go to the page pack.portland.gov, you'll get to this page here that shows the introduction. And can everybody see this new screen? Is this working?
Yeah, we can totally see it, Amy.
Okay, great. So this is the introduction page, and it'll just give you a quick description of the pack and let you know that it's not intended for like dry wells or other things. It'll give you a description that's for those basins and planters and slope facilities. And then it also gives you a reminder that professional judgment is still required. And you can read through that and then click I understand to take me to the pack. I've already signed into it, but when you first go in, it'll require you to create to log in and create a username. So you'll have to go through those steps first, but it's pretty straightforward. So you'll go through those steps. And then once you're done, it'll open up this page, which is the My Projects page. And the My Projects page, when you first open it, you won't have any projects listed because you haven't created a project yet. But if you do have a project listed, it will show you the project. And in this case, I have the presentation example. So when you first open it, it won't have this. So you'll only have the option of hitting this button, create a new project. When you create a new project, you can put in any name here. Like I'll just put in tests, it already filled these out. The ones with a red asterisk are required. The ones without a red asterisk are not. So you can always decide you're going to fill out your project summary later. So I'll create a project, and it lets me know that it created the project successfully. And it takes me to this project overview page. The project overview page, it shows you what you've just entered in. So if I want to go back and like re-enter in a summary, I can click this edit button and edit what I've already entered. And then the catchment page, which will allow me to create a new catchment. And then after I've created a catchment, enter a facility for that catchment. Or it lets me import a catchment and then add a facility with that catchment. And then also this page allows you to generate a pack report. Right now I can't generate a pack report for this project because I don't have any catchments. You'll notice throughout the pack, it'll have these little info tabs, and it'll tell you what each section is about. So it's just here to guide people, give you guidance through the steps of the process of using the pack. So I'll just walk through an example of like adding a catchment. So if you add a catchment here, the first thing is, you'll put in a name, and I'll just put test again. And it allows you to choose those different hierarchy levels that we discussed. So hierarchy level 1 is the on-site infiltration, and it shows you a description of what it is and then what your requirements are, that you have to infiltrate the 10-year storm and provide pollution reduction for the water quality storm event. And then there's hierarchy level 2, and that one has those 3 subcategories based on what type of stream system you're discharging to. So if you're discharging to the Willamette River, Columbia Slough, and there isn't any pipe capacity issues, then it's just the water quality treatment or the pollution reduction storm. If you're discharging to a stream, or a drainage way, then you have to do flow control and pollution reduction. If you're discharging to if it's basically the Willamette River, Columbia Slough, where there is a pipe capacity issue or something like that, then you have to do pollution reduction and a different kind of flow control. It doesn't include hydro modification, it's just these larger storm events. And then hierarchy level 3 is discharge to the combined sewer, and you don't have to do pollution reduction there, you just have to do flow control. So you would choose your option. I'll just do like 2B here. And then you have infiltration testing procedure and your infiltration testing rate. And so this is what, what you've done with the site, on the site to estimate the infiltration test, the infiltration rate of the soils. And something that's new with the pack is it allows you the option of not applicable. So if your site is contaminated or on steep slopes where there's landslide issues and you know that infiltration is not allowed on your site, then you can just put not applicable and it'll automatically put 0 with a reminder that your stormwater report should explain why infiltration testing is not applicable. But you have these different options of these different testing procedures. Unfortunately, there's one small error that was, there was a new deployment of the pack this morning, and a small error that I was added so that the open pit, you'll see the type of your test procedure changes your correction factor. And encased should be 2. Right now it's incorrectly showing 1, and I'm hoping to get that fixed hopefully by the end of today. And double ring infiltrometer, the correction factor should be 1, it's showing up as 2. So the correction factor does change based on your infiltration testing procedure. Unfortunately, the new deployment messed that up a little bit, but we'll focus on the open pit for today's examples. But you'll just know that based on your testing procedure, that impacts your correction factor. And the double ring infiltrometer is the more thorough test, and therefore its correction factor should be 1, and the other 2, the correction factor is 2. Basically takes the rate that you put in, like here I'll put in 5, and the correction factor is 2, so it divides that rate by 2.5 as a factor of safety. Then you have your catchment information, and again you can always check these little question mark box or info boxes to give guidance on how to fill this out. But you'll put in your impervious area, your post-development time of concentration, pre-development time of concentration, your post-development curve number, and then that map that I showed you earlier. We have those examples based on your soil type. So 79 is a typical one for that's in that table. And then after you've filled everything out, which I think is done here, then you can click validate and check results. And this will show you the Santa Barbara urban hydrograph results. And you can always check to get a little explanation of what this is. And it will give you the pre-development rate and volume and post-development rate and volume for these various design storms. And then at the bottom here, this gives you the option to either go to the facility to create a new facility, or you can click this little box here. The default is to have this box checked to say go to the facility. But if you uncheck it, it changes what this button shows, and it allows you to save the catchment without having to go and create a new facility. But note that if you do this, it will save a default planter with the catchment if a facility has not already been created. So I'm going to go ahead and just go to the facility, and we'll look at this catchment details page, or the facility details page. And you can always, this allows you to kind of move around. You can always go back to the My Project page or project overview page by clicking one of these links at the top. So the facility details page, it kind of gives you the name of your project, a brief summary of some of your catchment details, and it allows you to enter in different facility details. So you can choose the planter, the basin, or the slope facility. And remember, these are just based on the slope facilities if your bottom is sloped, basin is if you have a flat bottom but your sides are sloped, and planters if your bottom is flat and your sides are vertical. So you can choose different ones. And if it's a planter, the shape doesn't matter. If it's a slope facility, the shape doesn't matter, but a basin, the shape does matter. So then you have to either fill out that it's rectangular, amoeba, or user defined. And a rectangular is obviously, you know, just a rectangle. Amoeba or user defined. Those are different ways of calculating a more amorphous shape. And then the location is whether it's the parcel or the public right of way. And parcels can be public or private. It's just that it's not in the public right of way, because the public right of way will restrict your overflow height to 9 inches. And then you can choose your configuration. As a little guide, this image here will show you kind of what you're looking at with your the configuration that you're choosing. So you can choose configuration A. B has rock storage. C has rock storage plus an under drain. D, there's a liner that's been added. And then E has this extra overflow that goes to the rock, that it's that overflow that doesn't exit, it stays, you know, within the facility. And then F has an overflow that's actually connected to the outflow, but the overflow can actually take unfiltered flow and bring it down into that under drain. So you have these different options. E and F are kind of rare because those are hybrid UIC or underground injection control facilities that require some extra permitting. So these are the more common facilities that we see. And then depending on your choices here, you'll get different parameters that you would need to fill out for the above and below grade data. So all of them will have a bottom area, but then you'll have, like, you know, your overflow height, surface area at overflow height. There's these different parameters that you'll need. A basic one that I recommend to start off with is the planter, and then you can always refine things later on. So the planter has, you'll notice like a difference between the planter and the basin. The basins will have like, the basin here will have like a side slope, or with the user defined, you have to give the top area and the bottom area, so then the pack calculates a side slope for it. Whereas the planter, the side slope is, there is no side slope, it's a vertical wall. So when you fill out these different values, let's see, I'll do like, we have 1,000-foot area. I'll just do, say 100 bottom width. We'll do a 10 by 10 facility for flow height of 12. And then the total depth of blended soil plus rock. This is the rock plus the blended soil. So not just the blended soil, it's the total. So the depth of the rock will always have to be at least 6 inches. Like, you have to take this value and subtract 6 inches, because you always have to have at least 6 inches of blended soil above the rock. So in this case, I'll put a rock depth of 12. Well, actually, first I'll show you the, there's a use standard rock values button for facilities with rock, which is configurations B through F. And what this does is it calculates a quarter of the length of the facility times either 3 feet or the width of the facility, whichever is smaller. So if the facility is 2 feet wide, then you can only put 2 feet width of rock in there. But if the facility is 3 feet or wider, then it will calculate a rock width of 3 and then multiply that by a quarter of the length of the facility to come up with a rock area. And that's just a starting point. You can always change that, to a different value if you want to. And then the rock storage depth, I'll just put 12 here, under drain height. You can choose like any percentage you want for what percentage of the facility allows for infiltration. So if there's like a partial liner, it's not fully lined, but there's some obstruction, you can always put that it's allows partial infiltration. And then also, since I chose configuration C and D allow for an orifice. You have to decide whenever you choose C or D whether there is an orifice or not. And so this gives you there's a yes, no button here. And this case, I know I'll just say yes, and I can choose like a small orifice. But if I chose no, it would have me explain why there's no orifice. And there's 3 different options here. So you can either say it's a water quality only facility, that it doesn't need flow control, so there's no need for an orifice. Or you can say that it already needs flow control without an orifice, like it's a really large facility, it doesn't need an orifice for flow control. So it's a large catchment and it doesn't need that, where there's a lot of infiltration. Or the catchment is too small and you don't need an orifice, you just have to filter that 25-year storm event. If you click catchment is too small though, you'll need to click this button up here. So if I hit validate, it'll say, I clicked the catchment is too small, I also have to check that catchment is too small button. So the validations will let you know if there's an error in your thing. So since I checked that the catchment is too small, I have to also check that here. And now I can validate, check results, and it will show that the flow control is for filtering the 25-year because the catchment is too small. And then it'll provide information on the overflow, the under drain outflow, how much infiltration for both the peak rates and total volume. It gives you the facility area and the sizing ratio, which is the facility area to the catchment area, and the output hydrographs. So it kind of gives you the total outflow, which is in blue, the total inflow, the pre-development runoff, which is what you're trying to match for flow matching, and the under drain and infiltration. So it kind of gives you all of that information for these different storm events. And if you want to save it, you have the option to save here at the bottom, or you can save at the top of the section. But either way, if you don't save it, it won't save. So you have to hit Save Catchment and Facility to save it, and then it'll bring you back to this catchments page. And now you have that catchment. If you want to generate a pack report, you'd have to click on the catchment and click Generate Pack Report, and it will go through and give you the details and summary of that you would provide to the city for that project. So it gives you the catchment name and your flow control results and all the information that you'd entered in. And it also gives the results that and the graphs that come with that. So there's this, and then at the very bottom, it allows you to download, and that lets you save it as a PDF. So that's kind of just a quick overview of the pack itself. And now I wanted to step into some examples. So I'm going to go back to the My Projects page and go to these presentation examples.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Amy.
Oh, yeah.
I might pop in with a couple questions right now.
Oh, sure.
And people have been putting these in the chat, and I'd like to invite everybody to continue putting questions in the chat as we go. So Andre wants to know if there's a link to a table for curve numbers. And
there isn't a link in the pack,
mm-hmm.
but in the new 2020 Stormwater Management Manual, it's in chapter 2. There's a section near the end of chapter 2 that's called the presumptive approach. And within that, it has the that table.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we have an external reference to the to where you can find the soil maps for your particular site.
Oh yes, there is. Yeah, there is a reference to that to go into Portland maps.
Yeah. And then another question about underdrain height and the example used for 4 inches. Can you just describe what that underdrain height dimension is?
Oh, sure. Let's see. I'll open up one of these facilities here just to. So the underdrain height, or maybe I should go back to the presentation. Maybe I'll do that. I don't know. Is this too small to see?
Close enough. Maybe it's
so the underdrain height is just, so you can see here with the underdrain is within that bottom rock. And so it's saying the very bottom of the underdrain, the invert elevation, that bottom elevation of the underdrain where actually flow would start exiting, like where the water's sitting at the bottom of the pipe. It's that elevation because you need to have at least 1 inch of rock below the underdrain at the base of that underdrain to allow for rock storage, and anything above that is considered to be able to exit the facility through the underdrain. So typically a typical depth of rock might be 12 inches with 4 inches of rock below the pipe, and then a 4-inch thick pipe, and then 4 inches of rock above the pipe. And everything, we ignore the pipe diameter or the pipe wall thickness and assume that everything in that pipe section can exit the pipe. Mm-hmm. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, let's get into examples and then we can get to these later.
Okay. So project overview. So these are a summary of the examples, and I wanted to just step through based on each level to just kind of go through like how these might be designed. So the first one is catchment A, and this is I filled this out as an infiltration facility, so it's hierarchy level 1, which means you have to filter the 10-year storm event. I just have an open pit. It's got 14 inches per hour of infiltration, the infiltration rate. Impervious areas of larger site, 30,000 square feet from this example, 10-minute post-development, time of concentration, 20-minute pre-development, and then curve numbers of 98 and 81. So you can hit validate, check results, and see the post, see that runoff, and then go to the facility. So in this facility, I recommend starting off with about 2%, like when you're looking at hierarchy level 1 or hierarchy level 2A, I recommend with starting off at 2% because roughly 2% or a little bit less is typically required for a water quality facility, and hierarchy level 1 has to meet water quality. So it's going to have to be, in that at range in this at the small end. You might need to increase it, if their infiltration rate isn't high enough. So I start off here with 600, which is 2% of that catchment area, and have about the overflow height, because it's in the public right of way. Like if I change that to 10, you'll see that it's not going to validate for me because it had this error message saying that in the public right of way, it has to be 1 to 9. So I have to keep that at 9. I can have a blended soil depth because it's configuration A and there's no rock below it. The blended soil can go down to as little as 1 inch. We can have a very little blended soil because the soil beneath is going to also provide that infiltration. And so let's see here. Validate, check results. And you'll see that this facility is too small. The 14 inches per hour infiltration rate, wasn't large enough to be able to keep it at that 2% size. And you can see that shows an overflow volume, pretty significant overflow volume. So I'm going to increase the size of that facility. Let's see if I make it 1,000. That's still small. Like this is a 30,000 square foot site, so 1,000 square feet. Check those results, and then you can see it's getting a lot closer, but it's still not quite passing. So I bring that down to, let's see, 100. Okay, and that's passing. You see there's a little bit of extra capacity. I've got some room to make it a little bit smaller. So I can eventually, I'll just put it in here. I can make it down to 1172. And that's, you can see the surface capacity, which you can see in this graph. Is that the surface head here? You can see that 10-year storm just gets to that 9 inches almost, but doesn't quite overflow. And so that's you've optimized your facility at that point. Anything smaller, which I'll show that as an example, is going to allow overflow, and you won't pass the 10-year storm event. So in this case, just less than a cubic foot went over the overflow, and so it failed the 10-year. So you have to make it this size to have it pass, and then you can save the catchment facility and create a PAC report from that. And it'll process the request a little bit, so sometimes it takes a second to go to the page. And then this example, catchment B, is the water quality example. And so this is, water quality is going to the Willamette River, Columbia Slough, where there's no concern about the capacity in the pipes. It just needs water quality. And it describes that here. I have open pit, and you can see I have a very tiny infiltration rate. It's just 0.1. 12,000 square foot area. You don't have to actually validate and check the results. You can go directly to the facility if you want to. And so with this 12,000 square foot area, because it's a water quality facility, hierarchy level 2A, I recommend starting off with the 2%. So the 2% of the 12,000 is 240 square feet. So you can use the standard rock values, or change it a little bit. Validate, check results, and you can see that that's actually passing. So I can make it a little bit smaller. So let's see. Let's bring it down to 200. Okay, then 200 is a little bit too small. There was a little over 18 cubic feet that overflowed the facility. That meant it bypassed filtering through the blended soil. So then you have to go through and bring it up a little bit. And in this case, bringing it up to 212 will cause it to pass. The overflow volume is 0, and you used up your facility. 99.02% of the surface capacity was used in the pollution reduction storm, which means that you've optimized the size of your facility. If you made it, any smaller, it's going to be, the surface head just about reaches that 9 inches, but it doesn't. If you make it a little bit smaller, it's going to overflow. So I'll save this catchment and facility. And now these are the more complicated examples that are coming up because this involves flow control where there's the orifice option and the catchment too small issue. So these are the more complicated ones now. Oh, and I'm sorry, I want to go back quickly to catchment B to give another, I forgot, there's one more example to that. For the water quality storm, as I pointed out before, for configurations A, B, and E, those ones don't have that under drain that exits. So there's an additional requirement for the water quality storm. So if let's say I change this to configuration B, I have to show what percentage. Let's say I allow it's 100% infiltration. Suddenly, it's still that same size that other facility was, configuration D, but suddenly it's failing because it's not actually exiting the facility. It's there's that 0.1, that 0.01 or that 0.1 infiltration rate isn't sufficient to actually have the facility, like to have the water exit the facility starting to build up. Now, let's say we make that facility pretty large. Like I'm going to bring this is a 12,000 square foot area. I'm going to make it 2,400 square feet. Let's see. Validate, check results. And you'll see it's still failing. And this is something that the old pack didn't have, but I want to show this as an example here. The overflow volume is 0, which previously you'd think like, okay, it never overflowed during the pollution reduction storm. That would typically mean that it's passing. But in this case, it's still not passing. And the reason is if you go down here to that surface head, you can see that the facility after 3 days, it hasn't even drained yet. It still has, between 1.5 and 2 inches of water within the surface. And that's not even counting what's in the blended soil below. So it's not draining fast enough. When the next storm comes, it's already, mostly full. When the next storm comes, that storm's going, could be overflowing overflow and bypassing water quality. So we have this extra requirement for these facilities to make sure that not only do they not overflow during the pollution reduction event, but they actually drain so that the next storm isn't going to be overflowing. So then the next example, all of the rest of the examples have the flow control, which I think is the key the major new thing with the pack. So in catchment C, the facility planter, I'm going to go back to the project overview page. Catchment C here. This is hierarchy level 2B, which is to the streams or drainage ways. And it provides the description and what the requirements are. It has to provide pollution reduction and flow control. And you have your testing procedure. This is going to be updated. There's that small error there, but we'll just continue with this example. So the planter parcel configuration C or D are the only ones that allow an orifice. All the other ones don't have an under drain that only takes filtered flow that exits. So these are the only two that will allow an orifice. In this case, hierarchy level 2B, since it requires flow control, it's going to have this question, is the catchment too small for flow control? You'll notice that wasn't a question in the other two because flow control wasn't required in those other hierarchies. In this case, we have to look to see if the catchment is too small for flow control. So what I recommend doing, the other facilities you'll note, the hierarchy level 1 and 2A, I started at a 2% size. When there's flow control, I recommend starting at oversizing the facility and choosing like a facility that's like 10% of the catchment area, which is an oversized facility. It's not going to, that would be a large one. So in this case, it's 6,000 square feet impervious area. So 10% of that is 600. So I'll start off with that. And I'll start off saying, yes, there is an orifice. And I'll choose the very smallest allowable orifice, which is a 3/8 inch diameter orifice. And the thing you'll need to check to see is if that orifice is small enough to restrict the flow based on the hierarchy level requirements. So I'll show you that right here. The flow control requirements for the pre-development runoff are right here in this column, the 0.0107, 0.0343. These give them for each of the different design storms that are applicable to that hierarchy. And this is what you need to meet. So the stormwater outflow has to be less than or equal to these values for each of these storms. And the key thing you'll be looking at is, it's showing that it's passing, and this is a large facility, but the key thing you'll be looking at is this underdrain. How much is it restricted by? And the underdrain is restricting it to 0.004 CFS as the peak rate, which is less than, and you'll see all of these peak rates are less than the peak rates that they're required. So we can actually use a larger underdrain. So that's overly restricting it and causing more backup in the facility than is needed. So we can make that underdrain a little bit bigger. So we can try 1/2 inch and see what that does. So when you move it up to 1/2 inch, so we still have these don't change. These are based on your catchment area, not your facility. So we can look and see what the underdrain. Suddenly you'll see the underdrain the peak rate got bigger because we have a bigger orifice, which will allow more outflow through. And you can see it's still a little bit smaller than all of these. Than the 0.007 for the pollution, or that's not actually the half the 2-year 0.007 is less than the half the 2-year 0.0107, and then the 0.009 5-year is less than the 0.0343 5-year. So we can increase the orifice a little bit more. So let's try 5/8 of an inch. Check results. And you'll see suddenly that the underdrain outflow 0.011, that's actually, or the 0.011 for the half the 2-year, it's actually higher than the required limit of the 0.0107 for the half the 2-year. So it's actually the underdrain, even though this is a large facility that's not developing as much head as the size that you'd be normally wanting to see for your smaller facility. This underdrain is allowing too much outflow through the facility. So it's too big. We need to go back down to a 1/2 inch orifice. But so we have to go down to a 1/2 inch orifice and validate check results. And from that, we see that, let's see, we can go and see the surface head. You can see it didn't fill up. There's room for it to get smaller. The 25-year storm, we don't have to filter the entire 25-year storm. There can be a little bit of overflow. So these storms can get a little bit higher. So we kind of need to see, you just bring the bottom area down until it works. So I'm just going to bring it down by half, since the 10-year storm is, the 10% size is pretty large. And that didn't work. That still failed. But I bring it up a little bit, like 350. Suddenly that, that's passing, and we're really close now. You can see like 0.0074, 0.01, 0.03. They're starting to get closer. So let's see, I can make it 3, 5, and you just toggle back and forth, kind of iterate back and forth, like too small, too large, until you get to the right size. And here, it's still passing, and these are that 0.0584 is pretty close to that 0.061. You can see if I can make it just a little bit smaller, 304. And suddenly it's failing. It's just tiny, like it's 0.0612 to the 0.0610. That's just a little bit larger than 25 years, so it doesn't meet the requirements anymore. So we would need to bring that back up to 305 and validate check results. And there it's passing again. And now one more step. So now you've optimized the size for this orifice diameter. You can check to see, does a slightly smaller diameter make work? Like, is this smaller area? Will a smaller diameter work for this? In this case, it won't. But I just wanted to show that example, and you can see that it doesn't. So your orifice size is the correct one for this facility. The half inch, that 1/2 inch, and then the 305. So you just validate check results and see this passing, and then you can save that. And I'm going to quickly step through 2 more, one with a slope facility and one with another flat planter. And this one here, you can go back to the catchment details. This next example is for 2C, and that's where typically this would be used if you're like discharging to the Willamette River, Columbia River, or Columbia Slough, where there are pipe capacity issues, and you have to consider the flow control for the pipe. So there's both water quality and flow control for level 2C. And here I just have a infiltration rate. I chose 0 because you can put in 0. 1,000 impervious area 5.5. And notice this is a lot smaller, this impervious area, and that's I'm showing that as intentionally for this example. So this is a planter, it's on a parcel with configuration D. And I'm starting off, as I recommended, it's in a 1,000 square foot impervious area. So start off with a 10% sizing. So I have a 100 square foot bottom area just to start off. And I can use the standard rock values or not, you can always enter different ones in. And then the first thing you always check to see is this catchment too small for flow control? And so first I will enter in an orifice, and I'll choose the very smallest orifice, which is the 3/8 of an inch. And then I check results, and you'll see here that even with the smallest orifice in a large facility, it's still failing. And so what you'd want to check is that what's the peak under drain outflow? And you'll see it's 0.004, which is larger. It's 0.0040 here in this case. It's not showing the all 5 digits, but it's 0.0040, which is the under drain outflow, and it's 0.0036, which is what you're required. So already the under drain outflow is too small at a 3/8 inch orifice, or a 3/8 inch orifice, and you're not allowed to go any smaller due to the issues of clogging. So you can't go any smaller than a 3/8 inch orifice. So this facility is too small for flow control. It's a 1,000 square foot area with a hierarchy level 2C. And so in this case, we can check, yeah, the catchment is too small for flow control, and then say we're not going to have an orifice. And why? The reason is the catchment, the catchment is too small for flow control. And then you can validate, check results, and suddenly it passes because it's able to filter the 25-year event. And note, this is a large facility. It's 10% of the size, so we can bring it quite a bit down in size, and oops, and it should, would still be passing. You can see like the surface capacity use starts to increase as you get smaller. So yeah, so you kind of just iterate back, like it goes too small, too large, until you get to the size that's passing. So that kind of just provides that example. So we'll save the catchment and facility, and then lastly, I want to show a sloped facility because that's a little bit different in how you enter things in. So this is catchment E, and this is hierarchy level 3, which is a discharge to a combined sewer. So there's no pollution reduction required. That happens at the wastewater treatment plant. There's flow control requirements and no infiltration requirements. In this case, I chose not applicable for the infiltration procedure. Let's say this is going to be this will be a lined facility because it's in a contaminated area or something like that. And it's an impervious area of 1,000 square feet. And these are the curve numbers and time of concentration. You can choose to validate if you want to see, or you can just skip and go directly to the facility. In this case, I'm choosing the sloped facility, and you'll see here, it's a little bit different. The slope facility has this slope facility worksheet that pops up. And to add a segment, you can just add a segment by clicking this add segment button. You can add something here. And then to delete a segment, you have to scroll over here and then click delete. And your total depth of storage plus rock has to be the same throughout the facility. So that'll be, in this case, I put 24 inches. And you can use standard rock values. Standard rock values are a little bit different in slope facilities in that it's keeping the underdrain in that final segment. And so your rock area can be up to that area of the final segment, but it's not going to be for the standard rock values. You can of course make it larger, but the standard rock values puts it in the final segment. And then validate, check results, and these are the results for the hierarchy level 3, the discharge to the combined sewer. And you can see this one is passing. But let's say I decide, I'm like, okay, this is big enough. I'm going to delete and just make it one segment, because it's a slope facility. It doesn't have to have 2 segments. It can just be one. And in this case, that was a bad idea. I need to add that back in. So you can always, if you decide that you didn't like what you did, you can cancel. It won't save it, and I can go back into that facility and save it like that. And one more thing about the sloped facility is the final segment is the very last segment that you enter. So if I enter a segment now and I make another segment, that's going to be, I'll enter the segment length, the check dam width, which is only important for determining the final length of the facility. The longitudinal slope, you can go up to 0.2, a bottom width. Side slopes, 0 means it's like a planter, it's a vertical side slope. And you can't choose a 1-to-1 side slope. You can either go, it has to either be 0 or it can be 2 and essentially unlimited. It goes up to 99, but that would probably not be in your design. So basically 2 on up or 0. So if I put 1 here, it's not going to, it should say that that's a problem. Let's see. So yeah, the side slopes must be either vertical or not steeper than 2 horizontal to 1 vertical. So it'll like if you go outside of the ranges that are allowed, it'll give you that information and let you know. And so in this case, I can't do a 1-to-1 side slope. I have to do 2-to-1 side slope, and then that should be fine. So I'm going to just quickly go back to the main presentation as a quick summary and then take questions. Current slide. So as a quick summary, the sizing hierarchy level 1, that must meet infiltration and water quality. It's recommended to start with the bottom area of about 2% of the catchment area and adjust the size as needed. And we recommend or encourage minimizing the rock, which is why the design doesn't require full rock. It requires partial rock, or and we encourage minimizing that. Sizing hierarchy level 2A, that just must meet the water quality or pollution reduction requirements. Again, the same as for hierarchy level 1, start with the bottom area of 2% of the catchment area is recommended and adjust size as needed. The blended soil rate of 6 inches per hour determines the size. So it's same for all of the configurations. And then sizing for hierarchy levels 2B, 2C, and 3. These, you first must determine if the catchment area is too small for flow control, because flow control, if an area is too small, the smaller your area, the tinier your orifice needs to be. And we've set the orifice at minimum at 3/8 of an inch to prevent, minimize the issues of clogging. So some areas are too small for flow control. So first, to do that, I recommend using a flat planter with configuration C if infiltration is allowed, or configuration D if a liner is needed. And then with that smallest orifice, that 3/8 of an inch orifice, with a large facility like a bottom area of about 10% of the catchment area, and see if that orifice is small enough for the facility to pass. Will that orifice outflow limit it according to the hierarchy requirements? And if it can, then the catchment is not too small for flow control. You don't click that little checkbox. But if it is too small, if the orifice, if even with that 3/8 of an inch orifice, that under drain is allowing too much outflow, then you would click that the catchment area is too small for flow control, and you'll just filter the 25-year storm event. And then for once you've determined that, with 2B and 2C, you start with that 10% of the catchment area, you make that check, and then you increase the orifice diameter to the largest size where the underdrain outflow rate is less than the pre-development runoff rate. So you make that underdrain orifice diameter larger and larger until it fails. And then you bring it back down so it's still passing. And then you reduce the area of the facility to the smallest passing size. Then once you've done that, you just bring the orifice down by 1/8 of an inch less to see if the facility can get just a little bit smaller. If it can't, you leave it at that same orifice size. Or if it can, then you bring it down, that orifice down by 1/8 of an inch, and then reduce the facility size by just a little bit more. And the same with hierarchy level 3. Hierarchy level 3, just as a note, typically those are smaller than hierarchy levels 2B and 2C. So you could start with like a 7% size of the catchment instead of that 10%, because and that's still oversized. That's just bringing it down a little bit. The SWM Appendix 5 that provides assistance to the PAC. It has a table of showing some typical curve numbers and hierarchy levels, and what the largest impervious areas where flow control may be infeasible based on these kind of typical values. And it's got a footnote of what situations this applies to. The more infiltration you have, the larger your area can be and still provide flow control, or the smaller your area can be and still provide flow control. So infiltration helps with your flow control. You can have a smaller facility or a smaller catchment area and still provide flow control if you have enough infiltration at your site. So I guess that's the main summary. So I'm ready for any questions.
Okay, Amy, I've got a bunch of questions in the chat that I'll run through. So Ray has sort of a series of questions about sort of inputs, outputs, and kind of minimums and maximums. He wants to know if you can change the rainfall depths.
You can't change the rainfall depths in the so the rainfall depths are set in the PAC based on the city's design storms. So it's 1.61 for the water quality storm. It's 2.4 for the 2-year, 2.8 for the 5-year, 3.4 for the 10-year, and then 3.8 or 3.8 for the 25-year. And those are,
Yeah, so we set those for our standards.
yeah, those are set for the standards, so those aren't changeable.
He wants to know about having a locate. Is there an entry box for where you can put in the pervious area of a site? We don't have that, right?
So we do have like, do you mean like the imperviousness at the bottom, or I'm not sure if I understand.
No, so if you have your catchment area, we don't have inputs for pervious and impervious.
No,
So
yeah.
there's vegetated areas. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
He
just
would,
about impervious.
yeah, and the way the swim is written, we don't really regulate that, those areas. Do we have a way to print out a stage storage curve?
We could, that's a good question. If we could create something, we don't have, or actually not like, I guess that I thought that was a question for like developing a fact sheet with a stage storage curve of examples, but
I think it's for the particular project.
Yeah, for the particular project. It does show the, and I can go, I'll open up that. It does show your surface storage, the depth of surface storage as it changes over time, but doesn't show, it doesn't show what's happening below the surface. So let's see, I can open up. I'm not sure how to get back to the main, oh, there it is. So let's see if I scroll down here. So you can see the surface head here. This is just for surface storage. So it doesn't show anything that's once it's starting to filter into the blended soil or the growing media. It doesn't show anything there. It's just showing at the surface storage what the depth of water is in the surface storage over time. And the time is in minutes here at the bottom. And it'll show you over a 3-day period.
And then what's the maximum basin size? And I think maybe we want to answer this from the catchment area. What's our maximum catchment?
Oh, it's quite large. Now I need to, let's see if I might need to go into the, it's like, maybe like 99,000, but I need to, that's my quick estimate. I'm going to go into the pack or the, not the pack, the swim appendix here and see. It's at the very, let's see, oops. At the very last page of the swim appendix A5, it has the, oops. It has the list of the possible ranges. And so I think it should have the catchment area. Let's see. Impervious area, 1 to 999,999. Like we made it very large.
But I think that's sort of outside of the recommended range for use of the Santa Barbara method too, though, right, Amy?
Yeah, we allowed for a wider range, and same with like the curve numbers. We allowed like you can put in 1 to 99. That's not, you would like not use 1. Then you're not going to get any outflow from a curve number of 1. But just for flexibility, we allowed that full range.
Yeah, so there's the difference between kind of what numbers you're allowed to enter in the pack and hit go, and then
what are recommended. Yeah. And I didn't go through and list all of the, this gives a wide range of flexibility. And I should probably come up with like a table that shows more of the recommended values for like what the limits should be on the catchment size.
Okay, let's see. What's the maximum water depth allowed now since we're right here?
So for, it depends on if you're in the public right of way or on a parcel, which means private or public parcel, as long as it's not in public right of way. And in a public right of way, it's 9 inches. And for a parcel, typically you'd see like 18 inches, but I think we do allow it up to like 36 inches. Yeah, here, right here. you can go from 1 to 36 inches.
Oh, that's the height of the under drain. That's
Yeah, I guess that's the height of that's the surface storage depth, because once it gets to the top of the height of the under drain, sorry. Overflow is what I'm looking for.
yeah, so like ponding depth.
Yeah, ponding depth. Overflow height, 1 to 36. And then so 1 to 9
Okay.
for right of way and 1 to 18 for parcels is the typical within the pack, but you can go up to 36 inches for parcels.
Okay, what's the minimum depth of blended soil? I think that's there's like a couple, factors for that.
That depends on the configuration. So for configuration A only, which is actually, that's the next one right here, it's 1 to 12. And the reason being is that configuration A is the only one that doesn't have rock below it. So you can have a very tiny bit of blended soil. It only needs, because it's going directly into the soil below. For all of the other configurations, it needs to be 12 to 36 so as a standard, but the pack does allow it to go up to 60 inches. Yeah. That's the blended soil plus the rock. So that's not just the blended soil, that's the blended soil plus the rock.
Yeah. And then and you'll have to cross-reference the minimum depth of the blended soil with the requirements on the facility details. The pack doesn't isn't going to restrict you as firmly to the requirements that are in the details. Although they are related, but I think it provides you a little bit more flexibility.
I should add too that it does require, so this is the blended soil. So for configuration A, since there's no rock, it's just the blended soil depth, which is one can be 1 to 12. For configurations B through F, it's the blended soil plus rock, which is 12 to 36. But you have to have at least 6 inches of blended soil above your rock. So when you enter your rock depth, it can't be within 6 inches of that. It has to be at least 6 inches less than the depth that you entered for blended soil plus rock to provide that 6 inches of blended soil. And it could be greater than 6 inches of blended soil, but it has to be at least 6 inches of blended soil.
All right, sort of math storm question. Does the calculator base the half the 2-year on half the 2-year flow, or is it based on half the 2-year rainfall? I guess when is it divided by 2?
Oh, so it takes the 2-year storm event and then, and then determines the runoff for the 2-year storm event and then divides that runoff by 2.
Okay. A few questions on kind of pack layout and display. Comment here, Whitney thinks it would be helpful if the flow numbers were green when it was passing instead of red. Josh wants to know if there's an output box that shows the sizing ratio, the catchment area to facility area.
Oh yes, and I think here I'll go back to the pack itself.
I know we had that before.
So yeah, at the bottom here, it will show your sizing in the facility facts section. It shows your sizing, the total facility area to the catchment area, which in this case, this was an extra large facility at the 10.3%. It wasn't optimized at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'll show that. And then it does show, for the flow control results, the passing is in green and the fail is in red. So maybe I just went too quickly through the results because the passing does display as a green when it's passing.
I think the comment is about the flow number.
Oh, these values themselves.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I think, I'm considering how many challenges we had with the front end of this, I'm reluctant. That sounds like a great suggestion. I'm reluctant to request those changes.
Yeah.
So
it does seem like a good point though, but yeah.
It is a really good point. Another question that's similar, would it be possible to include a note possibly in red when the facility drawdown time exceeds 3 days? It could be fusing if fail shows up, even if there's sufficient storage.
And I guess I'd have the similar comment that Adrian just had, that it has been difficult making changes to the front end interface, but that is a good point.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, just for now, if we're not able to make that change, anytime you see that it fails pollution reduction when it's 0, it is because of that. It will always be because it didn't drain within that 3 days. That's the only reason it will ever show up as failing when there's 0 overflow.
Mhm. Tori wants to confirm that 3/8 of an inch is the smallest orifice, and because I think he thought he saw 3/4 in the pack.
Oh yeah, it does have 3/4, but that's larger than 3. Like the 3/8. So like there's 3/8 and then 1/2 and then up to 3/4. But 3/8 is the smallest one.
I'm sort of bouncing around a little bit to kind of consolidate similarly themed ones. So I just wanted to make sure I'm not missing any there. Okay. Is there a maximum area to be designed using the pack that would be approved? For instance, if I size a system in the pack for a 10-acre parking lot, would that be approved, or would there be a pushback to use a different method?
Yeah, and there are your point about the Santa Barbara urban hydrograph method being having limitations. We don't have that. That's not a highlighted thing where, like if you go outside of the range, it will highlight that to you in the pack. We don't have that right now, but that's something I could add if something goes outside of a typical range. I don't have that off the top of my head, but that's a good point to have some sort of reasonable maximum.
And did we, I don't think we addressed that in text in chapter 2, did we?
No.
Okay, I'm curious if the sewer design manual has that in the description of the, because it has all of those, like the different H&H methods and what kind of problems they're best applicable, best used for. Remember that? That's kind of a while ago that we've looked at that.
I'll have to go in and determine what that would be, but go look at that. But I just don't have that answer at this.
I mean, the pack is not a great tool for something that's up to 10 acres. And the Santa Barbara method isn't really necessarily either.
It has the catch-all at the front that says the professional judgment is still required, but it should have. I think it is good to have reminders when you're outside of a typical range.
Yeah.
Like here, if you do blended soil plus rock of 60 inches, you can do that. Let's see, but as you'll see, it'll say this value may be allowed, but note that it's outside of the recommended range.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of flexibility in it, but a lot of them do provide notes, but it's on when it's outside of the recommended range. But that's, I did not do that for the area.
Mhm. Okay, did I miss anybody's questions? Do people have any more? We're at the end of the ones that have been posted so far. And then, please feel free to reach out to us as you're using this if you have other questions or if you find something that's not working. We definitely, there are a lot of different combinations and permutations, and it's challenging for us to, check all of those. So, all right. So I think we're gonna stop recording now.